Day and welcome to Elementary 72 Gaming. Now, I'm going to discuss something before I start my match today, and my match isn't going to go into ranked. And this is quite simple. It comes to you playing the push. Now, the push is actually basically when you go into your enemy's territory or when your enemy comes into your territory. So, there are several things to note. Whenever you make a push, make sure that you do it at the optimum range. Now, in the first 5 minutes of the game, pushes are extremely difficult. If you do kill an enemy champion with a troop right there about to enter into range, kill all the enemy minions. Sorry, I was going to say the wrong words over there. But you make a push into the enemy turret. At this point, when you reach the turret, you now have a few seconds of attack. You don't destroy the turret, you take off maybe about 5 to 600 damage, and then you step away from the turret. If you linger any longer, the enemy champion has time to catch up to you, at which point they will attack you inside the turret, and the turret will join in on attacking you. That's going to make you die faster. So you pull back and you fall back to your turret. So that's every time you get an advantage where you kill them and the minions spawn at the same time. If you kill them and the minions are lagging behind, you'll do 1 to 200 damage before you pull back because the enemy won't jump straight in front of the turret. If the enemy arrives at the turret before your minions arrive, you obviously don't make a push, you just sit back and keep fighting that particular enemy. So this is the next point of attack. When it comes to the spawn of neutral objectives, that is the dragon and the Rift Herald, you make a push down the lane. Now, obviously, this is still within that period that I'm talking about, but you have just started to gain leeway. You should be at least for the dragon level 3 in terms of power. So you have 3 powers at bare minimum, 4 at maximum, which is where you should be, considering that you should be killing minions. And if you are the jungler, obviously you will be at level 4 moving on to level 5, or you will be level 5 into that stage. So with all of this, all the lanes should be well balanced and ready for a slight push. So you push up the enemy the moment the jungler enters into combat with the dragon. You'll notice it the moment the jungler's logo crosses with the dragon. So at this point you make a push. The whole idea is to make sure that the enemy falls back. You want to see where the enemy jungler is. So if you make a good enough push, the enemy jungler will be forced to gank a lane before heading towards the dragon or heading towards the Rift Herald. So if this here happens, you have made an objective push. So that is the whole idea. You want to gain that advantage. The first and second dragons, if I'm correct, increase your rate of earning per hour and your rate of mana recharge. So they do help you slightly in some positions, but not all the positions at that point. So once this happens, you now have the objective of the first dragon pushed in. If I'm correct, it's a gold increase because I haven't noticed much power. And there you have your first push. Now, during that same period, if you manage to clear your lane, in other words, kill both opponents, you don't jump in to fight the dragon. You move through on that lane and you look if the enemy jungler is about to come through. So you circle around the enclosure. This prevents them from ganking the kill. And once you have done this, you return back to your lane and you start cleaning up minions again and make your push as soon as it is available. Now at this point, your jungler has actually killed the dragon. He's either going to return to base or he's going to move towards a lane. If he's moving towards a lane like the mid lane or the side lane, that means you now have the opportunity to pull the enemy in. You pull counter offenses, you hit them with the spell, you attack, and the moment you see that he's ready to attack from a hidden position, you push. The jungler should jump in with a massive attack at this point, and this here will now equalize you with power and kills. It will make up for anything that you lost getting the neutral objective. It will also push you up into the lead if you have the right set of advantage. Remember, don't leave your turret during the push. Only push up slightly on the assault so that they move more close to the jungler. Junglers generally have a heavy hit that they can launch for that quick second, and if the enemy is slightly lower, it's going to make a big impact. At this point, if you do get 2 kills, let's say for example you're trailing behind 1 to 7, you are now 3 to 7. It's a nice closing on that advantage. It's 4. You push with the jungler into the turret and you take out 1200 of that turret if it isn't already damaged badly. Then you fall back towards your turret and your minions should be able to drop the turret the moment the next kill is pushed on that lane. So at this point it should be already down by, let's see, 1200 plus at least 2600s. That's 2400. They have 3500 health. It should have 1100 health left. At this point your respawn timers are really taking long. They're counting for more than 10 seconds, so you do have the advantage. The jungler will now disappear back into the jungle and return to pick up buffs. You will not go into another lane at this point. If you're calling for help, the jungler shouldn't be pitching up. If it does pitch up, it's just as a distraction to help you gain some time to fall back to recharge and get back to your lane. So at this point, one lane has had the advantage pushed. If you were lucky and you got the double kill, that's going to push you up by 2 kills. As I said, it's now 7-3. Everywhere else, everybody is making a push. Remember, the enemy jungler, if he hasn't showed up or she hasn't showed up, is now planning to gank on one of the lanes. So everybody falls back to the turrets and you keep playing the slow game. Don't push past halfway. If they do push you too hard, know that they aren't watching for the jungler. So at this point, when they push too hard and they enter into your half of the area, you make a heavy hit. At this point, your jungler should have cleared out both buffs again and should be returning to a lane. Now, please note, wherever you see the jungler as he's starting to make his push into the lane, you pull back slightly, and this pushes the enemy minion way too far forward. Obviously, it could be a jungler versus jungler gank in the jungle on the side. This won't really affect you in a bad way. It'll just mean that you're going to fall back to your turret and use the turret for your advantage. At this point, if you have pulled back far enough, the enemy unit has now pulled closer to your turret. Jungler will strike in and you will strike immediately after you're going for the kill. The whole idea is to share each other's kills with the jungler. Remember, the jungler gains power by taking objectives, and this is where his objective power is now going to start to shine. At this point, when you have made this push, you will now destroy that first line of turrets. When the first line of turrets goes down, you will fall back to your turret till the enemy minion returns, because the enemy minion is bound to return to defend the turrets on that line. Allow him to take out minions and allow him to make a push. Now, as he's making a push, you will have to try and counter him. Remember, you have a long distance to your turret. Also, the enemy has a long distance to the turret, but they also have the jungle to cover. You want to mark out and ward the jungle at the nearest entrance point to where you have taken it. This will now allow you to see if a gank comes from the jungle. The mid lane where you can take objectives is now open, and it will have a much lower focus. Your jungler will now be jumping between 2 lanes at minimum before returning to the jungle and reacquiring buffs. Now at this point, you should all be busting that first turret and you should be down 2 turrets. You will ward off all of your first entrances into the jungle, and this will give you a nice good range to see where the enemy is. You've now just given yourself the ability to stop the enemy from taking neutral objectives. Obviously, the jungler is now responsible for taking out the Rift Scuttlers and giving you full visibility. This will stop you from getting ganked from the back by enemy junglers. You will now keep your push on and you will pull back slightly. So you will push till you're halfway to the next turret and then you will start pulling back. At this point, the jungler should have pulled in both of the objective buffs and should be ready to help you with a quick push into one of the turrets. Once this is done, you will now be sharing buffs with your jungler. The jungler and another member of your team will be taking buffs from the enemy. The moment the 4th turret goes down, somebody will take an extra buff, so you now minimize the power of the enemy jungler. The enemy jungler can no longer hold 2 buffs because 1 buff is gone. The jungler will now return into the jungle and circumvent to the next lane. you will make a push on the lane the moment the enemy comes. Now, here are three big warnings. Sometimes the enemy will surge the lane in a full push. If they do make a full push, push back to your turret as fast as possible and wait for your team to arrive. Now, remember, your team is going to gank, so the whole idea is to play stun attacks, group assault damages. So champions like Master Yi are useful at this point. Garen, Lux, anybody of those class will be able to help you slow their approach. If you can slow them and beat them, you'll now take the advantage in the fight. And obviously, I'm counting that they are killing you slowly in this battle. So at this point, when the advantage shows up, you will now push on into their territory and break 2 turrets. You have enough power at this time that if you have 10 seconds, you can do something like 1,500 damage. And that's just if you arrive there at the last second when they spawn. If you have the troops moving in with you, you can now break a turret instantly. That's per player 1,500. Break the turret and push into the inhibitors. When you push into the inhibitors, you cause them to fall back from the lanes. Provided everybody hasn't stuck on one lane and you have broken up your pushes, it's going to allow you to now break all the other turrets and fall back. Now, when you fall back at this time, 1 player to each of the turrets, not 2 at any one turret, and the second player jumps in with the jungler. You want to get the first Baron Nashor buff at this point. This is going to give you your objective power to move forward. With that objective power to move forward, you will now push in with buffs. Whoever has that secondary buff with the jungler, in other words, stealing from the enemy, you now have all the buffs. That's 4 buffs total plus the Baron Nashor buff. You will now push down the lanes in a team of 3 on one lane, a team of 1 on the 2 side lanes. Wherever the enemy shows up, everybody will now gather together and push right through them. The Rift Herald buff is really powerful. It increases your durability, it increases your attack damage, and with the addition of the 2 buffs for the 2 players, it means that you now have additional attack power and additional defense. So they're really tough and they're really hard to beat. They can take on 3 people at a time, provided they have 1 other helping them. You now all make your joint push down a lane. You will instantly strike the lane, and at this point you will now gain your edge. The enemy will lose at least 3 players before you make a push to break a turret. While you break this turret, the jungler will separate off along with the member who gathered buffs, and you will return to the jungles. The jungler will pull out the buffs from his territory, his assault and defense buff, and he will then take out the dragon, because at this point the 3rd dragon of the game will spawn. Once the 3rd dragon has spawned, he will take it out and the game will now shift all into your favor. You now have additional gold, additional mana, and additional health regen. If I'm correct, it should be mountain then ocean, or ocean and then mountain. So 1 is gold, 1 is health regen. At this point, your entire team is basically healing slowly as you attack and fight. You can keep pushing the objectives and break the turrets. Once all 3 inhibitor turrets are down, fall back to your territory. If you haven't been playing enough of a guard, you should have lost your first turrets and possibly taken some damage to your second line turrets. This here gives you a nice cushion. You fall back, you wait for the enemy to make a push. At this point, you count once more on the jungler and the buffed member of your team to jump in and clear up the enemy team. The enemy team will be slightly down at this point if you have managed to get it to this particular strategy, and your enemy will take severe losses when the jungler and the buff member hit. You will also do again group attacks, group assaults, and this here will slow the enemy drastically. You will then all push to Baron Nashor, who should spawn at this exact moment. You will kill the second Baron, and this here will count you up to 14 minutes in the battle. Obviously, you don't want to be taking this long, but this is if you have ended up with the strategy. If you have managed to push into their territory and you manage to kill all the enemy heroes before you manage to get to their base, then you don't have to worry about anything. But if the enemy base is open and the enemy is there, you don't make a push, because this is how they counter you and how they can make a comeback. So once you have taken out the enemy, if you did manage to take them out, you can break the heart before the second Baron Nashor spawns. This here will take you down to around 12 minutes, and that's going to be a quick and easy win for you. Now, with everything that I've said, there are a lot of things which change in your strategies. Those are basic strategies, things that you should be thinking of playing if you lose turrets early in the game. So in other words, if you are on the opposing side of this entire push and you were down kills as well, so from the backwards point, your whole objective now is to make a push on a single lane. You will find that one lane has two enemy champions. You will gather your team together in a way that they can kill those two enemy champions and give you an opening. You will now try and push down that lane to equal out your sides. Once that lane has been opened, you will all gather back into the forest and you will start spreading out your lanes to form defenses. Remember, the enemy is going to make a push wherever they think you're weak. And at this moment, your jungler plays a big role again. He will gather buffs and jump in. If you have lost the first and second dragon along with the Rift Herald, you have to watch out for the Rift Herald deployment. And as things goes on, the more and more you put yourself on the back foot, the more neutral objectives you lose, the harder it becomes. If you ever find a team guarding for a neutral objective in full force, you run in full force to take the neutral objective from them. It's not really about fighting them. If you do see the opportunity to fight them and kill them. Obviously, if they half health or quarter health, you jump in, you kill them, and that weakens their defense very quickly because you're gaining an edge in terms of power and you're gaining more and more, what would be the term for this here? More and more momentum against them, so you can kill more and more enemies. And at this point, you now have the chance to steal the dragon or steal the Rift Herald or the Baron while taking out their jungler as well. So that gives you 3 or 4 kills. You're now objectively ahead, and that is how you progress to the next step. That's how come you only ever deploy 2 members to take out the jungle objectives. If you do have the enemy team completely down, you can deploy 3 or 4 members to take it out. Like Baron Nashor in the first stage is when the enemy is at least 3 members down, and it must be at least 20 seconds on their timers so that your entire team can jump in, kill Baron Nashor and get out. Once you have killed Baron Nashor, you now have that objective power. You can jump back to your base and move up with the push. It's always better to have stronger minions with you, because when the enemy minions drop, the enemy is under pressure to fight you and your minions at the same time. Plus you have the addition of more DPS on your side. You can hit the enemy with a lot more attacks, and you have a stronger chance of winning even if they overwhelm you with level. So that is just my quick discussion on strategy for a game. I hope that you all have enjoyed. See you all in the next one.